Welcome back to the Ripewave audio community. My name is John, and for this video, we are going to revisit the Anthem AVM 90 now that it's finally available to the market and truly released after a long time of waiting. And with this, it is coming with HDMI 2.1 8K capabilities. Now we'll compare this against the rest of the Anthem range, but I'll tell you up front, they aren't 8K yet. Turning back the clock a little bit, when we covered the AVM 90, originally, this was November of 2020. That was a long time ago. And when that came out, I spoke very favorably about how this was coming out in December of 2020. Now, I was going by the information that Anthem was putting out at the time, and I even reviewed some of the other press releases and YouTube reviews from that day just recently, and they all had this thing pegged for release around December of 2020. And we can see this from a snapshot of their website at that time. So it took a long time. And now the wait we can attribute to a few things. We know with the AVM 70 that didn't go out in December, but it did go out a few months later and was available to the public. It had some initial quirks, some challenges there. Anthem resolved them. Took a few months, but they did make good on them. And then they had product availability. So I suspect part of this delay was in part due to the availability of components, chip components, in the marketplace. So they probably held off. This is their flagship model, and they didn't want to have any production problems. So they probably waited until there was more parts available. But it also gave them the chance to get HDMI 2.1 incorporated in this before it went out the door. Now, before we get into this, we'll take a quick look at the Ripewave audio database, and there's been no changes since our last video. We went back and we reviewed all these companies, and it still stands that there are currently 11 brands delivering 44 8K models. But what we can do now is turn the Anthem one green, meaning that the Ripewave audio video has been made with this posting. So we've now covered every 8K capable AVR, AVP that's out there in the market. And this may be one of the few resources you can go to see them all. So I invite you to go back and look at all those other videos in our 8K playlist. So moving right along, let's get in and take another look at the AVM 90, and we've updated the slides. We've come a long ways in Ripewave audio and how we present this, and it gave me a chance to update this with our current graphics and infographics that we use to show this. So I think even if you've been following us and you saw that video we put out in November 2020 that covered the AVM 90 for the first time, we do have some updated information, and there has been some changes from how Anthem originally presented this. So one thing that has changed is the price. We thought it was expensive when it was originally announced at $6,999. When it finally hit the market, now we're seeing this $500 higher at $7,499. So continues to be more than double of the AVM 70, the next model down in processors from Anthem, to just get 2 additional channels. This is a 19 channel unit, 19 channels of output that is there. So this now comes in as a 2022 release versus a 2020 release as it was originally planned. And there's been no changes cosmetically from that. And it is a very attractive unit. This whole range that Anthem has gone through with a nice display in there and the smart layout of buttons this is a very modern looking processor. In comparison with the prior generation, we can only look at the AVM 60, which was what was there before, and really can't compare to the newer AVM 70 and 90 because that was only a 12-channel processor. But cosmetically, you can see the design language, how this has evolved. It was always an attractive unit from Anthem, but this then takes it to a more modern design. And even around the back, though, is a little more consistent. The way that they go about identifying inputs from outputs. Outputs are with the white background, and the inputs with black background are very common now in the marketplace. And I think that's a good trend. I do like the solid, just white for all channels versus having all the different color codes on each one, because you might have your own standard there for anyhow. But that's how they've gone about it. Very, very similar on the back through these generations. Looking at it, the full range of processors here, we can see how these tier down in pricing. So we have the flagship, which is the AVM 90 at $7,499, 19 channels of output. The AVM 70, which is effectively $3,800 with 17 channels. And the AVM 60 from the prior generation, which was a 12-channel unit, and that was $3,000. So a big range in prices between these three models. And of course, the AVM 60 is now discontinued. In fact, that got discontinued even before these were available, these new models. The receiver counterparts start with MRX. So we have the MRX 1140, which is the flagship of Anthem for receivers. It's 17 channels. So this coincides with the AVM 60 as far as channel count. This gives you 11 channels of amplification, which is a lot, at 140 watts driven into 2 channels. We don't get a all-channel driven rating from Anthem, and of course this is at 8 ohms that they're posting it at. The 740 is the next model down, and you drop to 7 channels of amplification, so it kind of lines up with the 740 numbering scheme at 140 watts into 2 channels as well. And the entry-level model, which is the MRX 540, this is the 8-channel entry, and this comes in at $1,699. Now, all these prices have gone up since their original introduction in 2020. Some models more than others, and of course, if you move up higher in the range, that price increase has been more. So yes, that entry-level model is 5 channels of amplification at 100 watts, 2 channels driven. Peeking inside, this is what we expect to see inside the Anthem. They're very consistent. This even looks similar in the prior generations where they use the toroidal power supply in these processors and these receivers. The red circuit boards is kind of their signature inside these products. Moving on to the high-level summary here, we of course look at the channel counts first here. And using our newest convention, and I know we've always stayed away from the counting the parallel wired subwoofer outputs. If they did 2 channels but it was wired in parallel, we'd always count that as 1. We're taking a little different approach now here, is doing a little color code instead. So if it is a wired in parallel, we show that in purple. So the AVM 60 and most of the receiver line, except for the flagship, really only has 1 subwoofer of output, really a .1, but wired in parallel, giving you 2 connections in the back. So now we're showing that as .2, but in purple, which equates to the legend on the left that says this is wired in parallel. If it is truly a replicated output from that source material of .1 LFE on your source material into 2 independently manageable subwoofer outputs, we show that in the bright green. So what's exciting is the AVM 90 gives you 4 independent subwoofer outputs or replicated subwoofer channels of dot 4. That's a true dot 4, and then the AVM 70 is a true dot 2, as well as the MRX 1140 flagship receiver is a dot 2. And so hopefully this change in the way we present this is even clearer for you. And we're always evolving on how we're presenting this. Now, the AVM 90 gives you the most flexible speaker layout at 9.4.6. Now, we're showing all the .6 as top speaker placements. Now, just keep in mind that the top front and the top rear could be moved as a height position mounted high on the wall. Instead, we're just showing this all on the infographic as the in-ceiling representation. But effectively, the way that Anthem does all of these processors and receivers is they specify exactly how that output should be. So you go in the back of the receiver and it tells you that this is for side surround, rear surround, front wides, etc. And that's what you have to use them for. They're not assignable, as we've seen in products like the StormAudio, where everything was completely assignable. So that's why we're showing them all in gray here, a little more on our convention. Now, the one instance where there is a choice is with that entry-level MRX 540, and we're showing in blue that that two of the channels can either be assigned to rear surrounds or to a top rear position, and a 7.2 configuration or a 5.2.2. The formats that the Anthem processors can decode is consistent throughout the whole range, past and present generations. It's Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. There is no DTS:X Pro as originally advertised by Anthem and reported by many outlets. I don't know what has changed. There wasn't any real announcement. It just kind of disappeared from the literature and the websites after a little bit of time when it was first announced. And suddenly you saw that there was no DTS:X Pro coming to these. And in general, we don't see a lot of processors, even with the channel count capability, announcing Pro support. We've mainly seen this on the really expensive McIntosh, Lyngdorf, Storm, and Trinoff levels, and less so at like Onkyo and Pioneer. They don't have Pro, even if they have the speaker count. So interesting to see that what's going on with DTS:X Pro. Is it just because the market's really not adopting it? The story right there is something we're still investigating. But certainly these models do not have DTS:X Pro as originally advertised. Now, they all have a 1/4-inch headphone jack. The older models had it hidden behind a door. We like the fact that it's just wide open right there on the front panel in this case. Now, they've taken away the AM/FM tuner that was on the prior generation. So all the new Anthem products don't have a built-in tuner. They all have removable Iec Power Cords. And this is a new feature to these presentations. As far as international power support, if you want to use this for either 110 power supplies or 220 to 240 power supplies, that you have to buy the specific model. These are not switchable or auto switching power supplies. You actually have to buy the model that's right for your region, either 110 or 220 to 240 rated versions of these products. So make sure you get that product right for your region. So we added that content because of one of the comments that was an important piece of detail for those of you who are there listening internationally. So thank you for that comment. Looking a little bit more into the formats of these, all have IMAX enhanced support, and it all supports DTS:X. For calibration, they're using Anthem Arc. Now, the prior generations originally came with just Arc, and then the new versions came out. It was Arc Genesis that was announced, but I'll let you know that Arc Genesis is compatible to a lot of versions of Anthem products, so it is compatible with the prior generation. None of these are THX certified. Looking at the DACs, there are 3 different types of DACs that Anthem uses, and on the AVM 90, which they advertise as having upgraded components in to help justify the expensive price there, the double the cost of the AVM 70. It is a good chip that they're using in there. It's an AKM. This is their 4499 EQ chip, and so this one is internally, just to the chip, is 140 dB signal to noise ratio with a negative 124 dB THD plus N. So this is some of the best chip ratings that we've seen out there with this chip. So that is up there. It is rated to handle 24-bit 768 kilohertz, and Anthem, touts this on their literature. As far as DSD support, the 4499 chip from AKM supports DSD 512. The 4490, which is in the AVM 70, is 256 DSD, as well as all the other models that use the AKM 4458 VN chip. But none of this seems to matter because it doesn't seem like Anthem has implemented DSD support, even though the chips that it uses has great support for DSD. This is disappointing because I know that DSD is becoming more niche as the years go on, but for those who have StormAudio discs and multi-channel ones, this is important because the DSD players, yes, they'll have built-in DACs, probably some very good ones, but they're outputting 2 channels. What is to become of multi-channel StormAudio discs? It would be nice if they actually implemented the DSD support. Now, the processors themselves, the output specifications, the AVM 90, of course, has the best specifications, but I see conflicting information between the websites and some of the brochures. In one case, we see a signal to noise being rated at 115 dBs. Another case, they say it's 110. I tend to think it's the 115 is the true because you got to get some benefit from that chip in there that's 140 dB signal to noise capable. So I tend to think that that's the true answer because the rest of the range, which is using lesser chips, has a rated output specification of 110. THD is rated at a negative 102 for the flagship, negative 100 for all the most current recent other models, and then the prior generations is rated at negative 95 dB. So some improvement as we've moved along. PCM is decoded at 24,192, and as I said, no DSD support. For the I/O, these have pretty healthy combination of HDMI. They all have 7 in, 3 out for the HDMI, with the exception of the prior generation, which was 7 and 2. So we've gained an extra output of HDMI with this new generation. There is 2 coaxial SPDIF, 3 optical, and 1 optical out on the digital interfaces. There's none of the fancy digital multi-channel formats that we see in more expensive units, nor is there any XLR balanced inputs on this whole model. The processors all have balanced support for the respective channel counts that the model supports. And otherwise, there's always going to be the unbalanced RCA outputs on these models from 15.4 down to 7.1 as supported in the entry-level model. Only the AVM 90 and the AVM 70 have a built-in Phono Preamp with moving magnet cartridge support. As such, the analog inputs for those models are at 4 sources versus the other ones without the phono input increase that to 5. So you will need an external phono preamp, but effectively, regardless, you have 5 total inputs that are analog sources. It's just whether that phono preamp is inboard or not. There are no legacy video inputs or outputs on these units. Looking at the HDMI video a little deeper, so the new AVM90 is the only one with 8K support. Of course, the other ones have some features built into them. So they have eARC support on the newest generations. The old generations only had ARC support. But it's only the AVM90 that give you 4K 120 and 8K 60 high frame rate support. And with that, the variable refresh rate, the quick media switching, the audio auto latency mode, etc., which aren't present in all the other models, until which time they've brought those boards forward to be upgraded, or with the new units to come out with 2.1 natively. We expect that will happen in the near future. Hopefully it's near. We've been fooled before. They all support hybrid log gamma. They are all HDR. They have HDR10 plus in the AVM90, but not in the others. Dolby Vision is supported throughout. IMAX enhanced in all the new generation products. Of course, only the AVM90 has the 2.3 copy protection, whereas the other ones would be all 2.2. So that covers down the video section. Looking at networking, they all have an Ethernet port, they all have Wi-Fi, they all have Bluetooth inputs. They don't have Bluetooth outputs or any of the fancy video or audio networking standards supported. When it comes to voice support, this is something that it appears Anthem is not focused on. We did see Alexa certification on the prior generation, but it's not something that has been carried forward to the present. They all support integration through Ethernet or infrared connections. There are trigger supports as well. There are 3 triggers, in fact, on the new generation, whereas there was only 1 trigger on the prior. And the good news is a lot of different integration platforms are explicitly claimed as supported. Control 4, Savant, RTI, Creston, Elon are all there. And it's unknown what the prior generation, because they weren't explicitly stating that. I suspect there was some integration capability that was possible. On the new products, we have AirPlay, AirPlay 2, Chromecast, that are all currently supported. Now, Roon and Spotify Connect have been listed as coming soon, since these products were originally announced in November of 2020. So that coming soon, we still wait. The internet streaming support, what Anthem seems to be doing is relying on those ecosystems. So if you have AirPlay and Chromecast, it's whatever those ecosystems are supporting and bringing forward to. And the same will happen when Roon and Spotify come into play as well. So it's not that these will be nothing, it's just not natively supported within the unit. And again, we think this is a smart move, as we've mentioned in other videos. Why go through all that effort internally? The remote carries through from the prior generation, and it's the same remote used on every model that Anthem has for processors and receivers. So nothing new here. They're all backlit remotes. They're, not bad. Looking at the side profile of this, we got thinking, like, this looks familiar. It's an interesting wedge shape, kind of trapezoidal in the front. And I said, well, we've seen this before. Where do we see it? We have at home a Samsung TV we bought in 2006. And this is the remote for it. And while the button layout is different, the shape of the remote is exactly the same as the Anthem, which tends us to think that they're sourcing this from a third party, putting their logos on it, just telling them where they want the buttons. But it's not a new design. This is from 2006. So that's all right. They can spend their energy on more important things. And you can see the 3 variants on this slide. In fact, there's a generic one you can get on Amazon, which is the middle picture there. So just an interesting sidebar there. On the dimensions, these are very, very similar. Of course, throughout the whole range, they're going to be the same height, the same depth, and the same width. What varies is the weight. So the flagship receiver is 32 pounds, 14.5 kilograms, and the flagship AVR is 22.1 pounds, 10.1 kilograms. It's not the heaviest ones we've seen, but still respectable there. The processors all consume 60 watts. The receivers range from 365 watts maximum to 570 watts for the 11 channel into 140 watt flagship there. Looking at this, from the human machine interface, we said the new big display is really nice. It tends to be, we don't see a lot of pictures on this. From what I can tell, it's mostly monochromatic, although I've seen splashes of colors in there like orange or blue, but it doesn't seem to be really utilizing a lot of color, and pretty sparse on what they're showing there. So I'd like to see more details on that display. It may be underutilized at the moment as far as its capabilities. But there is the user interface is predominantly a web interface. You can do your configuration and setting changes, etc. And this seems to be the trend in the marketplace to use more web interface. Although from the last video we've seen Storm, even talk about going back to a handheld remote. They were going to use no remotes at all and just do a web interface. So I think having options is good for the consumer, not just going 100% web. The Arc Genesis calibration system, of course, Anthem pitches this as room correction, but I'll take the point is they're taking into effect room attributes in their calibration and to correct for some of the elements caused by that. So I'm happier with the term calibration than correction, but okay. But this is a very well-regarded calibration system. It competes well with Dirac. Some give a little edge to Dirac, but I think they're in the same class at least. And as well, there is a mobile app for the Anthem products, and so these technologies are all shared through the range. So that wraps it up for the reintroduction of the AVM 90. This time with 8K HDMI 2.1 here and now. Now this isn't available yet across the whole range, but we suspect it is coming. Hopefully we don't have to wait too long. But what are your thoughts? Is this unit worth the close to $7,500 that it is selling for now? Is it worth twice as much as the AVM 70? I don't know. That's a big jump. There is certainly things we really like about the 90. We like to be able to bring in the 4 subwoofers, and I think that's predominantly what Anthem has done. Is that, hey, we're kind of the only game in town for 4 independent subwoofers under $10,000, so we can still show ourselves as undercutting a lot of its competitors, but still capture some extra profit for this. So it will be interesting to see if that pricing maintains. as more products are bound to try to bring that lower in cost to introduce a 4-channel. So like the likes of Emotiva with their RMC1, when they bring in more outputs, will that cause Anthem to rethink their pricing on the AVM90? That's our thoughts. What are your thoughts? If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to this Ripewave Audio community, and be sure to hit the bell icon so you are informed when the next video is posted. Until then, keep evolving your audio experience.